live on Kosher Tube. We're doing Parshas Korach this week on 8:20. As I warned everyone before, we get into all of these whole bunch of interesting characters now, with Korach and Bilam coming, and Pinchas, and some of the definitely the personalities that the Jewish people seem to be now. You can see they come from some interesting characters back then too. Right? So the parsha begins as Vayikach Korach. Korach took. Literally, Vayikach means to take. Vayikach Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahas ben Levi. So the first thing you have to wonder is, who's this guy Korach? Well, his father's name is Yitzhar, his grandfather is Kahas, his great-grandfather is Levi. Right? And it stops there. It doesn't tell you anything else. Of course, we know after that, before Levi was Yaakov. Right? Yaakov would have been the great-great-grandfather. So we right away, right, it's wondered as to why it is that it stops there. Like, usually you tell me the name of someone's father, right? Somebody and his father. You don't tell me his name of his father, the grandfather. But once in a while the Torah tells you the grandfather. But here it tells you the great-grandfather. So if you're going to do that, may as well go to the big one, right? Yaakov. But it doesn't. It stops right before him. So there's got to be a reason for that. And actually Rashi speaks about that. We'll get to that shortly. But the first thing that Rashi seems to be troubled with, which I think we should all be troubled with, is the funny way the parsha begins, which is Vayikach Korach. Korach took. Right? Who was he? It says his name, and then it says, and with him was Dasan and Avram, who were the children of Elihav, right? And then he also had with him On ben Peles, who were, and these were from the tribe of Reuven. So here you have Korach, and it says that he took something. So Art Scroll translates it as saying that he separated himself. Vayikach means he took himself to one place, and everybody else was another place. Right? He separated himself from the rest of the Jewish people. And that's exactly what he did, because if you look at Onkelos, who's a very early translation into Aramaic, he uses the word ve'ispleg, which means he fought, he argued, he disagreed. And that's how you separate yourself, right? If you have a group of people, and let's say you have three people together, and there's an argument, so usually you'll have one against two, which is pretty hard to have three sides to an argument. Yeah. So you'll have one against two. So the one, if the person who's the one is the one who starts the argument, so he's separating himself from everybody else, right? By having this argument, he's creating an us and them relationship, which until that point there wasn't. That's what Korach does. Korach comes in and he makes an argument. Although this is not the first occasion of what we call machlokas, a division or an argument in the history of the Jewish people. We have a number of them. The rabbis really consider this the gold standard of arguments. This is the example of really a sad example of an argument that is the source for much of what we would say the arguments among the Jewish people throughout history. Because I think the fact that Jews can often fight among themselves is almost a genetic requirement. It's something that goes on time and time again. We wish that while we could have disagreements, that they wouldn't be real fights, they would just be disagreements. But sometimes they get ugly. So here Korach is the founder of all of this. He begins this idea. So that's what it means. He separates himself. He takes himself over here and everybody else over there, right? And then, so why does it then end before Jacob? It only tells you the name of his father, his grandfather, his great-grandfather. So Rashi says, "V'lo hiskar ben Yaakov." It doesn't say that he's an offspring of Yaakov. Why? Because Yaakov asked God to be merciful to him and to lo yaskir shmo amachlokasam. Do not mention my name in the fight of Korach. In other words, I don't want to be a part of this. Don't say that Korach is one of my offspring, right? Because I don't want that to be how I'm remembered in the Torah. So leave me out. But it's a funny thing, because there are many horrible things that happen in the Torah, right? And everybody, if you're a Jew at this point, unless somehow somebody converted this quickly, you are an offspring of Yaakov. Everybody. There's nobody in the Torah who's not. Because Yaakov is the father of the 12 tribes. All the 12 tribes comprise the Jewish nation. So where would we come up with it that any problem within the Torah, any problem that there is, right, is going to have a relationship to Yaakov, and many times Yaakov is mentioned. So why in this time does it say that he goes out of his way to pray to God to say, I don't want to be a part of this? Right? All of the other fights that we have in the Torah, and some are pretty bad. I mean, here you have the golden calf. Right? The Jews worship a golden calf, and you have children of Yaakov doing it. Right? So why doesn't Yaakov say, don't say nothing about me here? But here he specifically goes out of the way to do that. And I think to understand this, we have to understand another story about Yaakov. You know that Yaakov had a prophecy that there would be 12 tribes among the Jews, and that they would be the foundation of the Jewish nation. And he realized that it wasn't Abraham who did, because Abraham was born and died. He didn't have 12 children. Yeah, it wasn't Yitzchak. He also born and died. He didn't have 12 children. Yaakov realizes that that he has the potential at this point of his life. He doesn't have 12 children yet. He has the potential to be really the founder of the Jewish nation. So in order to see if he's the one that Hashem wants, he says he goes and he goes up on the Temple Mount and he goes to sleep. And it says that he puts rocks around his body to keep little animals away from him when he's sleeping. They'll come up and bite him or something. So this way he puts them there. It says when he gets up in the morning, all 12 rocks that he put around him became one rock. So from this he understood that I'm going to be the father of 12 tribes, but the important thing of these 12 tribes is that they're unified, that they're one. They not only come from one person, from me, but they have to remain unified, 12 brothers who have unity. And then Hashem says, that's what I want for the Jewish people. That's why the rocks became one. That was the symbol that Yaakov was looking for, and that's what Hashem told him. We find that this whole idea of Hashem putting his name on something is the idea of unity. That's what Hashem wants. You see, for instance, it says by the case of the Sota, which we talked about, right? This was the suspected adulterous woman. So it says that they take this water and they put the dust from the temple into the water. Excuse me. And then they take the name of God on a piece of parchment and you dissolve it in the water. And you say, take the name of God, and you eradicate the name of God, it's a sin. You're not allowed to do that. But for this case, you're allowed to. Right? So people say, why would you erase the name of God in this case, right, where you have a husband and wife fighting? So the answer really is not that you erase the name of God when they're having this problem. The answer is that when you have a problem between a husband and a wife, God is no longer there. He's not there. He's left. You've not because in a true marriage there are three partners. There's the woman, and there's the man, and there's God. And if the man and the woman are not united, then God is not the third partner. He's not there. He leaves. So in order for she drinks this water, right, it has the name of God in it. If she isn't guilty of what she's being accused of, so then it says she reunites with her husband, and God becomes present. So the fact is that God's name is gone because they're fighting. That is to say, if there's not unity in a family, Hashem shows this disapproval by leaving, by not being present within this household. So too with the Jewish nation. Hashem showed Yaakov that you are going to be the father of the 12 tribes, but they have to be unified. If they're unified into one stone, into one people, then I'm present with them. Right? That's what he said. That's what Hashem is telling us. So here, right, you have Yaakov saying, I don't want to be a part of this. What is that? I don't want to be a part of Korach trying to split up the Jewish people. And that's what he's doing. Here he comes in with an argument saying, Moshe, you're taking too much for yourself. You're giving your nepotism. You're giving your brother is the high priest, and you're the king, and your nephew is the head of the tribe of Levi, and now you're taking everything for yourself. What about the rest of us? Right? That's how he's approaching it. And Yaakov says he's making a fight. I don't want my name there, because a fight means that God will no longer be present among us and will fail. So that means that in Yaakov's eyes and in the eyes of the Torah, the fact that there is a fighting within the Jewish people, be it in a family, be it a husband and wife, be it between brothers, be it between the nation, then God takes his presence away from us. And Yaakov says, I don't want that to happen. I don't want my name mentioned in any place where that's going to happen, because my name goes together with the fact that all 12 tribes became one. And I don't want to be a part of this. So that's why he specifically asks in this case. So now, we do see right away in the first line some of the host of characters that we have here. Not only do we have Korach, who's famous. We have Dasan and Avram, who are actually, according to the Medrash, half-brothers of Moshe, who were prophets, but who very much seem to be rebels. They don't seem to be following in the right way, and here we see that they take sides with Korach against Moshe. And a guy whose name is On ben Peles, who we don't know anything about, really. He just pops up here. His name is On. And we're going to hear about him a little bit more later on in the Parsha. Well, and it'll be interesting. And then it says, and they took with them 250 great people from the Jewish people, on their side against Moshe. And then basically what happens is they come, it says, Vayikilu Moshe, and they gathered together to start up with Moshe and Aaron. And they said to them, Rav Lechem, it's enough for you guys. You're taking everything. Kol Aidena Kulam Kadoshim. We're all holy. Every one of the Jewish people are holy. Why is it that only you and your brother and your nephew get to have all the holy positions? We're also holy, right? That's what Korach is saying. I'm holy. On is holy. Dasan and Avram are holy. The guy down the street's holy. Every Jew is holy. Why do you get everything? You should give some of the positions to other people also. Now we know, of course, he doesn't take these positions. God gives this to him. In fact, Moshe fights with God, so to speak, to say that he's not the guy who should lead the Jewish people. And nevertheless, God says you are. Right? And God tells him that Aaron is going to be the high priest. He doesn't make this up. Right? So it's not him. So they're really attacking Moshe, but they're really attacking God, because they know as well as we know that it was God who was behind this. So, right? So he says, Madua tisnasu akahal Hashem. Why is it that you hold yourself so much higher than all the other people? Vayishma Moshe vipol upon it. The Moshe heard what he said and he fell on his face. So there's a number of questions about this. What does it mean that Moshe heard and fell on his face? First thing is what are they attacking Moshe with? They're attacking Moshe that he's arrogant, that he's doing nepotism. He's making it that we're better than everyone else. Me, my brother, my nephew, just because we're of who we are, or our family, we're greater than all the other Jews. So we get all the positions, right? Now, this is sort of weird, because if you want to attack somebody, what you do is you find out their weakness and you make it public. Like they do, like in the newspaper with Mayor Ford, right? They claim he's got a weakness for abuse of substances, so they go and they find something he did wrong and they attack him. Well, are they going to attack him in an area that he's good at? Like he knows how to budget, he knows how to cut budgets. So are they going to say you don't know how to add? No, of course not. Everyone knows he knows how to add. He knows how to subtract. He knows how to do this. So why would they wouldn't attack him? So here we have, the Torah tells us, Moshe is the most humble of all people. That was just last week. The most humble person who ever walked on the face of the earth is Moshe. And along comes Korach, and he says, you are the opposite of humble. You think you're the only special guy here. You want all of the honor for you. You want to be the king. You want your brother to be the high priest. You want your nephew to be the head of the tribe of Levi. You want everything. And it's just the opposite of what Moshe is. Everybody knows Moshe is the most humble person. Everyone knows Moshe didn't want to take this for himself, that God made him do it. So then why would he attack him this way? Find something else that Moshe did. Say, you know what, Moshe, you messed up with the spies, or you made mistakes some other way, right? Here's the best one. You could say, Moshe, you're a bad speaker, right? It was about rabbis. You're not a very good speaker. You don't speak well. And we know Moshe doesn't speak well, right? He had a deformed mouth. He couldn't speak well. So say that, right? But he doesn't. He says, you're arrogant. You take everything for yourself. So how could it be so foolish that if you're going to attack somebody like Moshe, you're going to attack him in a way that everybody who's ever looked at the Torah knows is not true? So why that? So it says the answer is that the Talmud teaches us a very important fact about human beings. And that is, if you want to attack somebody, not you, if a person wants to attack somebody, usually when they do that, they attack the other person with their own flaw. Right? I would say, let's say, if I'm a thief, let's say I embezzle, like, I'm working for a company and I embezzle, and I see another guy, and I want to insult him, and I see he's sort of doing things he shouldn't do. So what do? I go in and say, you're embezzling. And maybe he's not embezzling, but that's because I do that. I see it in other people. If I'm not honest, I see other people aren't honest. That's how I justify what I do. If I'm late all the time, I see the other people late all the time. If Mr. X comes to shul late every week, and I, as the rabbi, come late one week, so he's going to say, the rabbi always comes late. Now I can come late, right? He justifies his own flaw by seeing the flaw in other people. That's how we all are. We all do this, right? And that's exactly here, because later on, Moshe says back to Korach, Rav Lechem, he says back to him, you have enough honor, right? Oh, Korach, what are you coming and telling me I have too much honor? You do. What does that mean? It means that Moshe is showing him a mirror, and he's saying, this is what you're doing. You think you're attacking me this? Everybody knows I'm humble. Everybody knows I'm not like that. But why do you attack me that way? Because it's your flaw. That's how you are, and that's exactly what Korach was doing. Korach wasn't out for the common man. He says, all the Jews are holy. Right? All the Jews are holy. Pick another one. That's not somebody from your family. That's not what he wants. He wants the job. He wants the job, right? He really wants all the respect and the honor himself. He doesn't want to give it to somebody else. So Moshe calls him on it because he knows the fact that if you're going to attack someone, you usually attack them with an area that you yourself are not so good at. And not that the other person is, but that's how we see it. And therefore, what we can learn from that, and is on our own lives. If we see other people and we're consistently seeing that these other people are lazy, or that these other people are not honest, these other people are exaggerating, before we start seeing these in other people, and we start taking this as true, we should look within ourselves, because very often when we see this in other people, what we're really seeing is something that is within us. And by our seeing in other people, we try to justify it. And that's exactly what happened with Korach. And he does that here. So now, it says that Moshe falls on his face. Now, in a separate thought, that was one thought I gave you on this idea, but the Gemara asked the question, why Moshe heard and he fell on his face? What did he hear? Specifically, what did he hear? So I gave you a simple answer. He heard what Korach just said. Korach just said that you take all the honor. But the Gemara asked the question, what is it that Moshe heard specifically that Korach said that made him fall on his face? So the Gemara says that Moshe had an illicit affair. That's what he heard. Moshe heard that Korach was telling people that he had had an affair, right, with another woman. And he fell on his face. In other words, because it's so preposterous. Because we've also just learned from last week's Parsha that Miriam, Moshe's sister, was punished because she complained how Moshe no longer had relations. He stopped. He was a bit different than everyone else because of his spiritual level. He no longer had relations at all. So how could he have had an affair, right? But nevertheless, Moshe hears this. So they tell stories that very often leaders are attacked by people, right? People attack them, and they'll attack them in preposterous ways, crazy ways, that have really nothing to do with the person. To say that Moshe had an affair with another woman is so preposterous, since he didn't have relations with anybody. Like, how would you make such a statement? So the idea is that Moshe heard this, and he came to the realization that when somebody wants to hurt you, they'll say anything. They'll do anything. It won't even be tied into reality, right? They'd say such and such a guy, he would beat his sister. Right? You imagine someone can say, oh, Rabbi Rothman is a terrible guy. He for years he would beat his sister. And I'd say, what do you mean? I don't have a sister. It doesn't matter. You still beat her. That's that kind of thing. So Moshe hears that. He falls on his face because it's so absurd. But we understand from this that very often people who are in roles of leadership are accused of preposterous, crazy things. And the question is, what does a person who's a leader have to do? And so based on a number of stories that I'd heard about great rabbis throughout the last couple hundred years, you come to the conclusion is that it's a part of being a leader. In other words, if you are thin-skinned and you can't handle people sometimes speaking to you not badly, not treating you with the proper respect, insulting you, saying crazy stories about you, then you have to not be a leader, because it's going to happen. A person who's a leader has to learn to deal with this. That doesn't make it right. Right? I'm not justifying it at all. It's totally wrong, but it's a reality of the human character, that people are like that. I know that, like, throughout my career, some of the absurd things that people have said, like that makes no sense. I can remember one time somebody was complaining to one of our members about me and how, I'd done all these terrible things, and I'd done them to him, and that I was, so horrible to him, and that I talk all about unity and friendship, and then I don't act that way. And so finally I told the guy, I said, normally it doesn't really matter who said it. That's really not who I am. But would you mind telling me who it is? Because if he feels this way, I'll apologize to him. So he tells me the person. I have no idea who this person is. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't know this person. I went to, and the guy's like the same age as some of my children. So I went to my children. I asked them, "Do you know this guy?" "Yeah." "Did I ever have interaction? Do you remember any time, like, since I've been here? We've been here like a long time. Any time that I had interaction?" "No, I don't." They said, "Maybe one time you met him, but I don't know where." So the fact is that people will make absurd statements, and if you allow yourself to be affected by it, you can't be a leader, because of this how it is. That's a part of leadership, and people will say these things. Like, even as a parent, it happens. You talk to your kids when they're adults, and they'll have memories of things that you did that are preposterous, that you just couldn't have done. But they'll really honestly believe that this happened in their mind, but it just wasn't possible. You just didn't do it, whatever the case was. And we do it with our parents, and our kids do it to us. Not necessarily negatively, like in this case where it's negative, or with people saying negative things, but it happens. People have funny memories that way. So it's just one of the things that we find here. So now Moshe confronts him. Right? You're trying to basically have a coup. You want to overthrow the leadership of the Jewish nation. You want to take over. So he says, he spoke to Korach and to his entire assembly, and he says, "In the morning God will make known the one who is his own and the Holy One, and he will draw him close to himself, and whomever he will choose, he will draw close to himself." So now he's proving to Korach and to everybody that Aaron is the high priest, and that God wants him to be the high priest, not me. So he says, "Go do this. Take fire pans." Right? They're like these shovels, little shovels, right? And you put fire in them and put incense in them, right? And the man that Hashem will choose, right? So that one will be shown by it. So it says they go and they do this, right? So the two things happen. First thing is, you have to ask here it talks about all the different people who participated, right? So you notice now, as I said before, this guy On, right? On ben Peles. I mentioned you'll hear about him again. Well, here is where you don't see his name. You see Korach and you see Dasan and Aviram, but you don't see On anymore. And there's a story about this. The story is that On had a wife, and that Korach had a wife. And when Korach would go home, his wife would say, "Listen, you schlepper, you're supposed to be in charge. Look at you. You're a leader. You come from a good family. Go out there and show them who you are." Right? She's pushing him, right? And then even when they find out that things are are not going the right way, she keeps pushing him. On ben Peles' wife says to him, "Hey, dummy, they come to you and they say 250 guys should go out now, and you should take these fire pans, right? And God will pick one of the 250. The other ones are going to die, right? The other ones, you have a 1 in 250 chance, right? That's what you got. In other words, that's all you're going to get, right? You really want to take this chance, right? It's like Russian roulette, right? You got 1 bullet and 6 shots. So when you spin the thing, maybe you'll have that bullet that'll kill you. Maybe not. But that's 1 out of 6. This is 1 out of 250. Right? There, 1 out of 6, you can be killed. You got 5 chances you won't get killed. Here, you have 249 chances you'll be killed, and 1 you won't. right? So his own wife says to him, "Don't be foolish, right? Don't do it." So why is that so smart that she says that? Like, why is that such a smart idea? The reason it is that is anybody would say that. You don't have to be some brilliant woman to tell your husband it's a 1 in 250. Don't do it. You're going to get killed. It says instead, she understood that her husband's not thinking straight anymore. They're in the fire of anger. They're all fighting with each other. And when people fight, they lose control. They don't. You see it with divorces, right? I don't care. I want to spend $100,000 with this lawyer because my ex-wife ain't getting this $500. It'll cost me $100,000, but she ain't going to get the $500. It's worth it to me to do that. People say that. They really believe that. Right? They tell a story with the Chafetz Chaim that we have an understanding that if you become what we call a Baal Machlokas, a person who's a master of fighting with people. Right? It's all you do. Right? Like people walk on eggshells around you all the time. So if you do that, it says when you fight like that, it says that your children are punished by God and they'll die young during your lifetime. So the Chafetz Chaim tells a story. There's an actual story there's a documented story about him that this was going on in the town where he was, and he went to the guy and told him, "Don't do this. Don't fight. Your children will die." And the guy tells him, "I don't care. I'm right. I have to fight this. It's the cause." And his child died. It actually happened. Right? And he fought. He kept fighting because he lost his mind. Right? When you think you're right in an argument, as soon as you hear the words, "It's not the money, it's the principle," you know that it's crazy. Right? There's no principle. It is money. If you're arguing about money, it is money. There's no principle here. Right? When people say that, that means that they've lost their logic. So On ben Peles and Korach, they lost their logic. They were willing to go and have a chance that 249 of them are going to die, and one of them is going to live. Right? Are you crazy? You're going to go do this? And they're about to do it. So On ben Peles, that's why she's wise, because she didn't allow herself to get emotional like everyone else did. Right? So therefore she saved his life. So you don't see him anymore. He's not brought in here because he's not a part of it. He backed out. So he wasn't killed. He doesn't have the same problems everyone else did. But all the rest of them are, they're going to have a problem. So it says they went, right, and it goes through this whole thing where Moshe complains to them, and and Aaron is eventually picked, and then you have another one where they come and they say that they want to be the leader of the tribe of Levi. So they all say, "Okay, everyone take their staff." No, excuse me. They want to be take over as a Kohen Gadol. Everyone should take their staff, right, a walking stick, and put it down. So it says they'll put it down, and Aaron has to put his down. And Moshe puts Aaron's in the middle, right? So they say, why? So the Gemara asks, why does he do that? Because if he had put it on one side, people would say he put it closest to where God was, so he would be picked. And if he put it the other side, he would say he put it in a place where nobody would notice, so that he could play a trick and Aaron would be picked. Either way, he was stacking the cards. So Moshe put it in the middle. But you have to ask, why? It's a miracle. The stick grew almonds. The stick grew flowers. Right? That's how they knew who was supposed to be the one in charge. Right? Because it did that. So it makes no difference where we put it. It still made a miracle, and it still did it. But the fact is that if the miracle was not exactly 100% done in a way that was not natural, that you can't explain it, then nobody would believe it. So like magic tricks. You got a magician, because you can be mystified by a magician, but as soon as you see a little bit of how he does what he does, it's no longer even interesting anymore. You've lost your interest because you see it's not magic. It's not a miracle. It's nothing extraordinary. It's just he's just moving his hands fast. Right? So it's the same thing here. If Moshe would put it first, where it was the closest to the presence of God, they'd say it's got nothing to do with him being chosen. It was the closest to God, so that's why it was chosen, not because he should have it. But what do you mean? He only chose one. Don't you think that that's enough? No, because you can explain it away, then you don't. And that's what we have this with people all the time are trying to tell us how the miracles of the Torah, they're not real. The Red Sea split. It says, in nature, once every 50,000 years, whatever, the wind goes in a certain way and would cause the Red Sea to split. right? So that's very nice. It's an interesting story. They say it's not a miracle, it's science. It happens. And right? First thing is, well, how do you know that? How do you even know? Where do you see such a thing? All right, so let's say you've got some physicist or some weather expert figures out that this is going to happen. So the fact that it happened at the exact moment that the Jews are standing there, and that they went into the water, and the moment they came out is when it closed and killed all the Egyptians, right? That would say that's pretty miraculous even in of itself. That it happened right when they were there. Not you want to tell me it wasn't a miracle because it was already set into nature and it'll happen again? But that the fact that they were there at that moment, that they needed that miracle, that to happen right then, even if it's not a miracle, that's a miracle. And they said, no, because we can explain it through science, it's not a miracle. We can explain that it wasn't really blood, it was really a plague, it wasn't really this, it was really that. And they come up with all these explanations. And they say, well, the fact that they happened when Moshe said they'd happen, they stopped when he said to stop. What was he, a scientist? Like, did he know science that no one else knew? And it happened exactly when they needed it to, and exactly in the way they needed it to. And when Pharaoh hesitated, it didn't happen. And when he didn't, it did. And when Pharaoh tells them, I want you to do it, get rid of the frogs tomorrow, not today. It happens tomorrow, not today. Like, so you can. Why do people look at these and say it's not a miracle, it's science? Even though even with science it's a miracle, is because as soon as they have a way to explain it, then they say it's not real anymore. I don't have to believe this, right? And that's what people do. It's the same idea here. As soon as you can say that the stick blossomed because it was closest to the presence of God, not because Aaron is really the right one, so then I don't have to listen anymore, right? It's not, all right. The Torah is not true. That's where it comes from. So then. And if you look on 826 and 827, Moshe finally is frustrated by them, and he says, this is what's going to happen, you guys. You want to keep doing this. Every time you bring out the pans, you have the sticks, anything you want, we've shown you it's not my choice. This is from God. Right? You still want to argue about this? This is what's going to happen. Tomorrow, you're all going to die. You're going to die. The earth is going to kill you. Now, why doesn't he just say he just won't wake up in the morning? Tomorrow morning, when it's time to get up for go to shul, you're not going to wake up. You'll be dead. Because it says very specifically, through this shall you know that Hashem sent me to perform all these acts, that it was not from my heart. If these die like the death of all men, and the destiny of all men is visited upon them, then it is not Hashem who has sent me. In other words, here Moshe predicts that every one of these men are going to die tomorrow. They're all going to die. I'd say that's a pretty big miracle, right? Moshe knows they're all going to die tomorrow. So here, but Moshe says, nope. If they all die tomorrow, but they die like anybody else dies, then that's just coincidence. That's not even a miracle. They have to die, what we call it, with a misa meshuna. They have to have a weird death. Every one of them has to die in a weird way. If they all die in a weird way tomorrow, then you'll know God sent me. It's not enough already that they should just die. Then you will explain it away. You'll say, oh, it was a plague. Moshe sent a bug in there. A bug bit them, and they know. It's got to be weird. So it says, if they'll die like other men, right, then Hashem sent me. But if Hashem will create a phenomena, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them, and all that is theirs, and they will descend alive into a pit, excuse me, then you shall know these men have provoked Hashem. When he finished speaking all these words, the ground that was under them split open, the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them all and their households and all the people who were with Korach and the entire wealth. They and all that was theirs descended alive into the pit. The earth covered them over, and they were lost. All Israel that was around them fled at their sound, and they said, the earth will swallow us. And a flame came forth and consumed 250 men who were offering the incense. So here we have Korach and his main followers get swallowed up, and all those guys who offered the incense, right, at Korach's insistence, they were all killed. So here you've got them, they're swallowed by the earth. Right? Now, there's a couple interesting things. Some of them very pertinent, but some of them are just a little off the topic. But one of them is very interesting. You know, there was I saw an article in the paper last week about a book. It was written by an Orthodox Jew from Italy, and he was flown to somewhere in Western Canada to speak. And I think it was in Winnipeg. And he spoke about all the secrets of the Sistine Chapel. Right? You know how you have Da Vinci, right? He did I mean, was it? Yeah, he did the Sistine Chapel, right? And they said that, he said that a lot of the things at the Sistine Chapel are very strange. So it happens to be that I agree with him. I mean, he doesn't need me to agree with him. I presume he knows what he's talking about. He has studies of this. But I happen to have gone there a couple of years ago, and it's not a church. This person in the Sistine Chapel, even though it's called a chapel, it's a meeting. They meet there. They have elections there. They do things there. So you're allowed to go in, and you can see the ceiling that was made. This is an extraordinary thing. But if you look at it, you have a basic training in rabbinic Judaism, where you understand not just the word of the Torah, but how the Talmud interprets it, or the Medrash. You see interesting things in the roof, in the ceiling, that you would not expect that the person who painted it would know, because he wasn't Jewish, and it was the Middle Ages, and it was in a Catholic country. So one of the things that I noticed was this story. And if you look there, it has a depiction of the story of Korach, and you have the earth opening up and all of the people falling in. But if you look at closely, you see that a little bit down, there's a little cliff hanging off inside the pit, but hanging inside the pit. And some people landed on that, right, and didn't fall into the earth. And they landed, and so the Medrash tells us that these were the children of Korach, because it says the grandchildren of Korach studied Torah in BaMidbar. In other words, they changed. They became the religious leaders. So how did that happen? If Korach and his whole family were killed, there was no grandchildren around, right? So it says that some of them repented, but because God said they would fall into the earth, they fell into the earth. But because they repented, they landed on this cliff, and they could climb out before the earth closed, and they did. And in the picture, you see the cliff. And you see people sitting on the cliff inside the earth. It's not in the Torah. It's in the Talmud, right? And it's in the Medrash. So the fact was, how did he know this? Right? Where did he come up with this idea that it was in there, that it's there? So the fact is that when we were there, we had this woman who was an observant Jewish woman who had a PhD in art history, and she explained it to us that when he made the ceiling in the Sistine Chapel, so he had what they call a patron. Now, artists have patrons. They pay them. So his patron were the Medici family. The Medici family lived north of Rome, because then Italy was not a country, it was city-states. So you had Rome was its own country, right? And the Pope banished all the Jews, and they banished them to the north, to like Florence. And the Medicis were there, and they said, we'll take them, right? We want them. And they used the Jews to create international banking. They didn't have such a thing in the world, but because you had Jews all over the world who knew each other and trusted each other, you could give $100 to a Jew in Florence, and he would send a message to a Jew in Morocco, let's say, that to give $100 to some other guy. So he would give them the $100, and now you have international banking, even though the money never left, and the money, right? Because eventually the two guys would settle up, right? So he created international banking, and the Medici became, world famous and world rich, like very, very, very rich. So they were the patrons of what's his name, who did the ceiling, Michelangelo, and when they did that, when they were his patrons, they also had children, and they hired rabbis to teach their children, because the rabbis and the Jews were literate, right? Jewish women, Jewish men knew how to read and write. Back then, not the average person didn't, but these people wanted to educate their kids. They were rich. Their kids should know how to read and write. So they taught them all types of things, including they taught them about the Bible. So when a rabbi talks about the story of Korach, he's going to mention that. And so here you've got Michelangelo living in the same house, and he hears it. Right? So he may or he may not. I mean, this book says that he was a religious person, a religious Catholic. Other people say he wasn't. But the fact was, he learned about the Bible, the Torah, hearing it from rabbis speaking right to the students in the same house as him. So when he drew the pictures, he drew it based on our tradition, not even necessarily realizing that it's not the tradition that the Christians had. It could be, it might not be, but that was just an offshoot of that, and you can actually see it if you go there or you look at pictures. You can see what I just described. It was one of many things like that were clearly Jews and Jewish influences.
They found an 11th century Torah in Italy.
Yeah, I saw.
A complete Torah, not a.
Yeah, it's like
fragments,
yeah. I read about that in the paper. I haven't found any more information on it, but I saw that. Okay, so that's pretty much goes through much of the story, right, of Moshe and Korach and Aaron. But it goes on a bit more. Like the whole story of the staff is on 8:30 and 8:31. Right, where he says, "Bring back the staff of Aaron," and they have to do the whole thing with the staff that I told you about, where they put it where Moshe put it, and how it grew blossoms and almonds on it, and that was the symbol that Aaron was supposed to be the one. But then the parsha changes, right, and it goes into other areas of things. It talks about some of the gifts that are given to the Kohen, and it talks about the firstborn. Let's look at that for a second. I just want to find it. If we look on 8:34 and 8:35, it says here, "Every first issue of a womb of any flesh that they offer to Hashem, whether man or beast, shall be yours. But you shall surely redeem the firstborn of man." So this is telling us a couple of things. This is the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben, redeeming the firstborn child. And why is that? Because what it is that originally every family, when they had children, the firstborn son of that family was a Kohen. That's how it was supposed to be originally. That not that there was a tribe of Kohen. There was supposed to be, every family had a representative representing that family in the temple, and it was the firstborn child. But because of what happened with the sin of the golden calf, it says that Hashem took that privilege away and gave it specifically to a group of Levium who didn't, right, practice the sin of the golden calf, and they were the Kohanim and the offshoot of Aaron, the children of Aaron, and they would become the priests. But nevertheless, originally it's supposed to be the firstborn. So here it says that the firstborn, even of humans, right, belong to the temple. Right? Because that's how it was originally supposed to be. So since the Kohen does it, the Kohen has to sort of be bribed by each family to give the child back, so to speak. Because I'm doing your job. I'm the Kohen, I'm doing the job of the firstborn. So you got to come to me and buy your son back because he belongs to me. I represent the temple. And I'm going to do his job. So that's how we have the mitzvah of Pidyon Haben. And that's what happens here. And the firstborn of any pure beast, right? And you have to redeem them. And how does it go? Those that are to be redeemed, from 1 month shall you redeem according to the valuation. So, firstborn son on the 30th day of his life is redeemed. 5 silver shekels by the sacred shekel. You have to give 5 silver coins, right, in order to buy your child back. Right, and then it goes through some of the different animals and the whole idea of what they do there. And today, when you have it, so you have to have a firstborn. Firstborn would mean that the mother couldn't have a miscarriage, and it couldn't be that the first child is a girl. It has to be a boy. And another important thing is that it can't be a Levi or a Kohen, because if it's a Levi or a Kohen, right, you wouldn't redeem them, because a Levi is part of the tribe, right? Kohen is a Levi. Any Kohen has to be a Levi. They're a subset of Levi, and any Kohen is a Kohen. So you don't redeem themselves. So like I'm a Levi, so like I was a firstborn in my family. I would not have had Pidyon Haben done, but other people would, right? So those are some of the rules about it, about the idea.
So you wouldn't have had it because you were already
I'm already a
Kohen, like you
right.
were already.
I'm part of the tribe already, so there's nothing to redeem me from.
Okay.
I was already a part of that group.
So it's only if you're another tribe.
If you're anybody but from Levi, right? And that would mean including Kohen, because Kohen is a part of Levi. And it goes through then various different of the gifts and things that Hashem says should be given to the Kohen and to the Levi. But let's take for a moment, instead of looking at the words, there's a famous Pirkei Avos, or Ethics of Our Fathers, that says that there are 2 types of arguments in the world. There's one kind of argument which will sustain because it's a positive argument. And there's another type of argument which will not be sustained because it's a negative argument. And what's the example of a positive argument? That's the example of, it says, of Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai. Right? Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, Hillel and Shammai themselves, they disagreed on almost everything, but they disagreed for the sake of Torah, and they didn't fight. Like, they didn't go and have a mob come in and like beat each other up. They just had differences of opinion, and they would argue that, but they would still marry into each other's families. They still had relationships. They still studied together, but they had arguments for the sake of Torah. Right? You say that you have to do this on Shabbos, and I say you have to do this on Shabbos, and they would argue it. Right? Then you have, that's called an argument l'shem shamayim, for the sake of heaven. That kind of argument will be sustained because it's a positive thing. It's there to improve our lives. It's not fighting. What is an example of one that is the other type of argument? And that's Korach ba'edaso, Korach and his followers. Right? And that's an example of an argument that will not sustain because it's an argument, right, that is about personal. I want this. You have the honor, I want the honor. That's a fight. Right? That's not just a disagreement over academic ideas, even if they're academic ideas the world is based on and are very important, like Torah. But nevertheless, it's a personal fight between them. That won't go. But if you even look at the words in the Medrash, in the Mishnah, you notice there's a difference. It says, as one that is sustainable is like the argument of Hillel and Shammai, and one that is, and they're opposites, right? Hillel says one thing, Shammai says another. So these are the two sides, right? That argument, Hillel and Shammai. Then the other one is Korach and his followers. Well, that doesn't fit. Hillel and Shammai are two sides of the argument. Korach and his followers are one side, because it's Korach and his followers against Moshe. You'd say Korach and Moshe, Hillel and Shammai. That's an equation, right? See how it fits? Korach and Moshe argued. Hillel and Shammai argued. Hillel and Shammai argued for a good reason. Korach and Moshe argued for a bad reason. But that's not what it says. Hillel and Shammai argued for a good reason, and it says that Korach and his followers, well, they didn't argue at all. They're one side. Where's Moshe? You say Korach and his followers and Moshe. Then it makes sense. It's the same. Side one, side two, side one, side two. But you don't have side two. There's only side one in this one. Am I clear? Mm-hmm. Right? So the idea is then, according to commentaries, they give us many answers to this. One is that when you're fighting for the sake of yourself, your honor, who am I? I am the best. I should have this. Then even your followers fight with you. Right? Even the Korach and his followers, they were each fighting with each other as to who was going to be the one that's chosen. They were only united in that it wasn't going to be Moshe, but they weren't united in who's going to get picked. Right? It's like when you bring enemies together for the sake of to fight a third enemy. Right? You can have two enemies get together because they want to fight somebody when they themselves are enemies. You could say Iran and Syria. Right? They unite together against Israel. But if there wasn't an Israel, Iran and Syria, they'd be fighting each other. Right? So they're only friends because they both hate Israel. So they'll get together to fight Israel. So Korach and his followers didn't get along. They fought with each other too. So that's why it says Hillel, Shammai, Korach and his followers. Korach and the followers, they couldn't even get along with each other. That's why their argument was no good. Another one of the commentaries say is that comes from the line that says that it is and it says here in the Torah that there will never be another argument like the argument of Korach and Moshe. No, there'll never be another argument like that in history. So what does that mean? There won't be another argument like that in history. And what it means is you'll never have in history another argument where the argument is black and white, 100% black and white. It's 100% we know that Moshe was supposed to be the leader. We see it in the Torah. God told him to do it, right? And we know Korach is wrong, 100%, right? There's no question. But when we have arguments, it's not so black and white, where I'm 100% right and you're 100% wrong. It's never that way. It's always, I think I'm 100% right and I think you're 100% wrong, but really, maybe I'm 50% right, maybe I'm 30% right, maybe you're 70% right. But what happens is as soon as we start fighting, we lose perspective and we start believing that we're fully right and we're not. And it's not black and white. And so when you have these arguments where someone says, I know that machlokas is bad. I know that fighting with other Jews is bad. But I'm right. I'm right here. They're all wrong. They've got to know that they're wrong. That's every single time. That's not just now. Everybody thinks that. And none of them are correct. Never do you have a time when the one person in an argument is 100% right and the other person is 100% wrong. It just doesn't exist. And that's what it means. It says you'll not have rise another argument like the argument of Korach and Moshe. Because every other argument in history will be cloudy, will be gray. Right? It won't be black and white. So we need to realize that when we have these arguments, or we see these arguments, and we think, but I'm right, because I'm right, it's not like Korach. Korach was wrong. I'm right. The fact is, you're not 100% right. Nobody is 100% right. As soon as you get into an argument, you have to realize that there's already something that's going to be a flaw, a lacking. What we get from all this brings us back to the beginning of why Yaakov didn't want his name mentioned. He's mentioned in all types of horrible stories, but in this story doesn't be mentioned, because we need to realize that machlokas, fighting, is the essence of all of the trouble that the Jewish people have had. It's a human problem, right? We started the world. You only had 4 people in the world: Adam and Eve and their 2 sons. And the 2 sons, brothers no less, kill each other, right? You only have 4 people in the whole world. The world's not big enough for them, right? That's it. So from then, there's always been some type of argument. But arguments among the Jewish people have been something that's been constantly happening. But we have to realize, especially this time of year, as we're entering into the period, right, getting closer to what we call the 3 weeks, the 9 days, and the 9th day of Av, with the destruction of the temple, that the temple was destroyed because we fight with each other. That's why. Period. Not because we didn't keep Shabbos, not because we didn't keep kosher, which are all things we should do. The temple was destroyed because we fought with each other. And the temple has not been rebuilt because we haven't fixed it. We are still fighting with each other after all these years. Right? How many times, like God's saying already, how many times have I got to hit in the head, right, before you realize that all you got to do is get along with each other and the world will be a better place. And you'll get the temple. Things will get back. We'll work on the other stuff. Right? It's like you say to your kid, look, I know you stay out all night, and you do things you shouldn't do, and you stole my car, right? But you know what? You lie to me all the time. If you would just stop lying to me, I could forgive the other stuff. It happens. We'll work on the other stuff, but just stop lying to me. If you don't lie to me, and we can have a good relationship, we can work on the other things. God's saying, you don't keep Shabbos, maybe we're not keeping kosher the way we should, maybe we're not following all of the laws, but you're fighting with each other. Stop fighting with each other and we'll deal with the rest of it. But we don't. And for all of these, for 2,000 years now, since the Romans destroyed the temple, we have gone through all of these things in history, right, from the pogroms to the Holocaust and all of the problems that we have, right? Even you can take even small things, like people complain to me this time of year, Shabbos is over so late. It's like you get home, it's 10 o'clock at night on Saturday night. I tell people, I don't know what you're complaining about. I'm working on Shabbos, right? You're sleeping for 4 hours in the daytime. I never do. Right? I'm up early in the morning, and I'm not complaining, by the way. I happen to enjoy this very much, and I'm very happy, and I feel very privileged to be able to do this. But by 10 o'clock at night, when we're sitting at Shalosh Shudas on Saturday before we're finished, I'm falling asleep. Right? It's a long day. Right? Well, you know why we have to have Shabbos till 10 o'clock at night? Because we fight with each other. And we weren't fighting with each other. We'd be back in Israel. They don't have Shabbos till 10 o'clock at night. The clock is different there. The sun sets at a more normative time, just like in South Africa, right? You don't have crazy differences like we do. You don't have it where you come from. The times are much closer. Here, you have sunset at 4 o'clock, you have sunset at 10 o'clock. Like, that's crazy, right? So, now that's nothing compared to the stuff that's happened to us throughout history, but even that would not be the case. We wouldn't be talking about how, it snowed in Cape Town today? Do you know that? It did. Today. I don't think it ever snowed in Cape Town before. Today. Look in the newspaper, it snowed in Cape Town today. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting thing, but we have snow all the time here, right? Yeah. You wouldn't have to worry about it. Stop fighting with everybody. You don't need to buy new boots and go to Israel. But we can make light of it, but the fact is, this is the issue. With Korach, does here is that he makes fighting into an art. Right? It's like an art. And we've perfected that art throughout history. And we need to really deal with this. If we deal with this and we get along with each other, then the other issues, Hashem will work out with us. But until we do this, we're still stuck. Yeah?
I mean, it sounds like you're saying it's, it's like so important, right? It seems like, I mean, like, you don't hear that, often. I don't hear like that it push so much, right? That how we shouldn't be fighting and taking care of each other. Right? You hear a lot of other things, or people think other things are more important, right?
Well, I don't think that this is just, I mean, I stress it a lot, but I don't think that this is my idea. I think it's pretty common. It's just that, first thing, it's not very newsworthy, so you're not going to read about it all the time. You're going to read about all the arguments. Right? Oh, look at any Jewish blog. They're not going to talk about pieces breaking out all over. It's going to talk about how this guy said this about that one, and this one did this about that one, and you should go to the army, and you shouldn't go to the army, and you should let women pray at the wall, and you shouldn't let them pray at the wall. You got all kinds of stuff going on, right? But the message of all of these things are that if we would get along with each other, you can have disagreements, and we'll come up with an answer. Should the religious people go to the army? Should they not go to the army? We'll work it out. But if we're going to fight with each other, we can't work it out.
It's just like, I don't know everybody's feeling, but I've never, heard that it was like that expressed. I think it's a beautiful thing, right? That we, like, you don't see articles of, hey, we should get along, we should get along. Like, it should be something that's continually,
repeated?
Like,
I believe you're right. I happen to see it probably more often than you're mentioning, but definitely we need to do this, and I would say that any rabbi you speak to would agree with it. It's not like I'm not making it up. It's not personal.
It's sad. It's not commonplace. Like, I mean, I've had some Orthodox relatives and people I see, and it's really not something like I wish they would say something like that, on a daily basis. We should all get along. It's more like, oh, are you doing this? Are you doing that? Like when you see them, like, right?
Well, sometimes if it was so easy, then I guess we wouldn't have to talk about it. That's why maybe that's why. But we all have our flaws.
How many people are you having for this Seder? Like, it's just trivial stuff that they, instead of like,
well,
is your family getting along?
In order for it to be an argument, there do have to be two sides, though. So it's not only whoever they are, it's also us. We're also doing it. So we all have to deal with it. As much as I like to say it, I also do it, and I try not to do it, and I don't want to do it, and I know it's wrong, and it happens. Somebody will say something wrong to me, and I will get upset, and I'll blurt something out, and I don't mean to, and then I got to go apologize, and I feel bad, and they feel bad, or maybe I won't apologize because you keep doing this to me all the time, and we always have excuses. The bottom line is, right? Like I said, we always think my case is different because I'm right. What you did was wrong. You shouldn't do that to me. You shouldn't cut me off. You shouldn't insult me. You shouldn't take my money. You shouldn't call me by my first name. Whatever it is, you shouldn't do this.
Even when you come into every synagogue, it's too bad it doesn't say we're all, we're mainly trying to.
I don't know. We do. It's pretty prominent here. I mean, we don't have it written on the wall, but walk in. You see, we have a greeter. They greet you. They bring you in. We have classes at all different levels. I mean, we have classes here that it would bore me to go to some of them because they're so introductory. They're for people that come in who don't come regularly, so that they should feel welcome. And when a person comes in, we have a greeter at the door, so they should feel welcome.